Have you ever sat in your own kitchen, drinking coffee from a mug you've owned for 30 years, only to realize you've somehow become a guest in your own life? Because that's exactly what happened to me. My name is Robert Whitmore. I was 68 years old when my son looked me straight in the eye and told me to move into the guest room of the house I'd spent 42 years paying for. And before the next sunrise, I listed the house for sale. What happened afterward destroyed one family and saved another. The trouble started 3 months after my wife, Linda, passed away. 43 years together, 43 Christmases, 43 anniversaries. And then one hospital room, one final heartbeat, one funeral. After that, silence moved into the house with me. The silence was unbearable, so when my son Eric suggested he, his wife Melissa, and their 2 kids move in temporarily, I welcomed them. Just until we save enough for a bigger place, Eric promised. I believed him, because that's what fathers do. We believe our children. The first few weeks felt wonderful. The house felt alive again. The grandkids ran through hallways. Laughter returned to rooms that had forgotten how to smile. For a little while, I thought maybe life was giving me something back. I was wrong. Little things changed first. Melissa reorganized the kitchen, then the living room, then the garage. Then she started referring to rooms as our spaces. Not mine, ours. Then came the comments. Robert, maybe don't leave your newspaper here. Robert, maybe use a coaster. Robert, the kids need more room. Every sentence sounded polite. Until you listened carefully. Then one evening I came downstairs and found my recliner gone. The recliner Linda bought me for our 25th anniversary. My chair, my spot, my memories. Gone. Where is it? I asked. Melissa smiled. Oh, we moved it into storage. It didn't really match the room. Didn't match the room. Imagine hearing that about something you've sat in for 20 years. I should have said something. Instead, I stayed quiet. Big mistake. Because disrespect grows when it's fed. And my silence was a buffet. 3 months later, everything changed. It happened during breakfast. Just after sunrise, the grandkids were still asleep. Melissa was scrolling her phone. Eric sat across from me looking strangely nervous. I knew something was coming. Punkrents always know. Finally, he cleared his throat. Dad, that single word carried bad news. Dad, we've been talking. Never a good sign. Melissa nodded. We think it would be better if you moved into the guest room. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because surely I misunderstood. The guest room? Eric shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, the master bedroom works better for us. I stared at him. The master bedroom? The room where Linda and I raised children. The room where we celebrated birthdays. The room where we held each other during cancer treatments. The room where she took her last breath at home before the ambulance arrived. That room. You want my bedroom. Melissa sighed dramatically. Robert, please don't make this emotional. Don't make it emotional. As if memories were clutter. As if grief was inconvenient. As if 43 years could be packed into moving boxes. Eric wouldn't meet my eyes. It's just practical, Dad. Practical. That word hit harder than any insult. Because it meant they'd already decided. They weren't asking. They were informing. I looked around my own kitchen. My table, my dishes, my mortgage, and suddenly understood something. I wasn't family anymore. I was an obstacle, a leftover piece of furniture, something taking up space, something waiting to be moved, so I smiled, and that scared them, because calm people make dangerous decisions. Sure, I said. Melissa visibly relaxed. Eric smiled. Really? Of course. I stood, finished my coffee, carried my mug to the sink, then walked upstairs. Neither of them noticed I wasn't upset. I was done. There's a difference. At 6:17 a.m. the next morning, I made a phone call. By 7:00 a.m., a realtor was sitting at my dining room table. A woman named Karen, sharp, professional. Efficient, she asked one question. Are you sure? I looked around the house. The family photos, the hardwood floors Linda picked herself, the garden visible through the window. Then I nodded. Very sure. Karen pulled out paperwork. Based on the market, we can move quickly. Good. I wanted quickly. By 8:15 a.m., professional photographs were scheduled. By 8:45 a.m., the listing was live. By 9 a.m., offers were already coming in. Then the fun beg Melissa discovered the listing first. The scream echoed through the entire house. Eric. I was watering flowers when they stormed outside, phones in hand, faces pale. "What is this?" Melissa shouted. I glanced at her screen. "Oh," I smiled. "The house listing." Eric looked horrified. "Dad, you can't sell the house." I blinked. "Why not?" "Because we live here." The irony almost made me laugh. "Yesterday I lived there too. Apparently that hadn't mattered." I folded my arms. "Actually, Eric, I own the house." Melissa stepped forward. "You didn't discuss this with us." I stared at her, the woman who told me to leave my own bedroom, the woman who moved my belongings without permission, the woman demanding consultation. "No," I said calmly. I didn't. The silence was beautiful. Then Eric tried guilt. "Dad, what about the kids?" There it was, the children. The emergency brake every selfish adult pulls when consequences arrive. I nodded slowly. "What about them? What are we supposed to do?" I looked him directly in the eye. The same thing I would have done if someone told me to move into a guest room. His face went white because finally, he understood. News spread quickly. My daughter Jennifer called first. Unlike Eric, Jennifer lived independently. Unlike Eric, she respected boundaries. Unlike Eric, she remembered who paid the bills. When she heard the story, she was silent for 10 seconds. Then she said, "You actually listed it?" "Yes." Another pause, then laughter. Real laughter, the kind that comes from witnessing justice. "Dad, yes? I'm proud of you." I hadn't heard those words in years, not from an adult child, not sincerely. And somehow they healed something, but the rest of the family wasn't nearly as supportive. My sister called, my nephew called, my cousin called. Every conversation sounded identical. "Maybe you're overreacting." Funny. Nobody called Eric dramatic when he claimed my bedroom. Nobody called Melissa unreasonable when she erased my place in my own home. But when I finally protected myself, suddenly I was the problem. That's how entitlement works. People tolerate disrespect. They resent consequences. 3 days later, an offer arrived, cash, above asking price, 30-day closing. Karen called immediately. "You'll want this one." I did. I accepted within the hour. That evening, Eric came to my room, not the guest room, my room. I never moved. He sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in months, he looked like my son again. Scared, vulnerable, human. "Dad." I said nothing. His eyes filled. What happened to us? Now that question hurt, because it was honest. I looked at him, really looked at him. The little boy who used to ride on my shoulders, the teenager whose baseball games I never missed, the young man whose college tuition nearly emptied my savings. And I answered truthfully. "You stopped seeing me as a person." Tears appeared. "You started seeing me as a resource." He lowered his head. "And when people become resources," I paused, "they become disposable." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry. The problem with apologies is timing. Some arrive before damage. Others arrive because damage finally costs something. I wasn't sure which kind this was. 1 week before closing, I invited everyone to dinner. Eric, Melissa, the kids, Jennifer. A few relatives. The atmosphere was tense. Nobody knew why I'd invited them. After dessert, I stood, raised my glass, and gave the speech they'd never forget. I spent 42 years paying for this house. The room became silent. I thought I was building a home. I looked around slowly. Maybe I was actually building a test. Everyone listened, because homes reveal character. I turned toward Eric. When your mother died, I was broken. Toward Melissa. When you moved in, I was grateful. Then toward everyone. And over time, I learned something. My voice shook not from weakness, from truth. The people who love you make room for you. I swallowed hard. The people who use you make plans for you. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Several people looked down, then I smiled. A small, peaceful smile. The house is sold. Gasps, tears, shock. But I continued, and that's okay. Because for the first time, I meant it. This house served its purpose. I looked at Linda's photograph on the mantle. It gave us a family. Then back at the table. And now it's teaching us which parts of that family are real. Melissa cried, Eric cried, even I cried, but not from sadness, from release. 30 days later, I handed over the keys. The new owners were a young couple expecting their first child. They walked through the front door holding hands, excited, hopeful, dreaming, exactly the way Linda and I had once walked through it. As I left, I touched the doorframe one last time, not because I was losing something, because I was thanking it. The house had sheltered me, protected me, raised my children, and in the end, revealed the truth. Eric and Melissa moved into an apartment, smaller than they'd hoped, more expensive than they wanted. Reality has a way of charging overdue bills. For months, our relationship remained distant. Then one Sunday, Eric called. No requests, no favors, no agenda, just a call. We talked for 2 hours. For the first time in years, he listened more than he spoke. That's when I knew something had changed. Not because I sold the house, because I finally taught him something, a lesson every child eventually learns. Parents are not permissiotinetsis. They are people. People with memories. People with dignity. People who deserve respect. Today, I live in a smaller home near Jennifer. I drink coffee on my porch every morning. I watch the sunrise. I think about Linda. And sometimes I smile remembering the look on my son's face when he discovered the listing. Not because revenge felt good, but because self-respect did, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The moment someone treats you like a guest in your own life, you don't ask for permission to matter. You remind them. And sometimes the most powerful reminder comes with a for sale sign in the front yard. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, not because I had slept well, because I hadn't slept at all. My son's words kept replaying in my head. The guest room makes more sense, Dad. Not would you mind? Not can we talk? Not even thank you for everything you've done. Just a decision made about my life in my house. The house I'd bought 31 years earlier after working double shifts at the steel plant. The house where my wife and I raised our son. The house where every scratch on the hardwood floor had a story attached to it. And now, apparently, I was being reassigned like old furniture. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and stared out the window. The backyard was still dark. The swing set I'd built with my own hands stood near the fence. My grandson loved that swing set, funny. I'd built almost everything this family enjoyed. The deck, the shed, the garden, the college fund, the emergency loans, the down payment assistance. But somehow I had become the least important person in the house. At 6:15 a.m., I opened my laptop. At 6:20, I called a real estate agent. By 7, I had signed the paperwork. The house was officially going on the market. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Some lessons require timing. And timing is everything. Around 8:30, my son Ryan came downstairs. He looked tired, probably because his wife, Melissa, had spent half the night redesigning my future. He grabbed orange juice from the refrigerator. Morning, Dad. Morning. He sat down. I noticed he couldn't quite look me in the eye. Interesting. People always avoid eye contact when they're ashamed, or guilty, or both. We should probably start moving your things this weekend. There it was. No discussion, no question, a schedule. I smiled. Sounds good. He looked surprised. You aren't upset? Oh, Ryan. I took a sip of coffee. Why would I be upset? His shoulders relaxed instantly. The relief on his face almost made me laugh. He thought the problem was solved. He thought compliance meant acceptance. That was his first mistake. 3 days later, the listing went live. Professional photographs, drone footage, beautiful descriptions. Stunning family home in a highly desirable neighborhood. Rare opportunity. Move-in ready. Within hours, requests started flooding in. Apparently, the housing market was hotter than I realized. By evening, we had 6 scheduled showings. The next morning, 11 more. I still hadn't told Ryan or Melissa. Not because I was afraid, because anticipation is part of consequence. The reveal happened on Saturday. And it happened beautifully. Melissa was in the kitchen scrolling through her phone when suddenly she froze. I watched it happen from across the room. Her face drained of color, Then she blinked, looked again, and sat upright. "No," she whispered it. Then louder. "No," Ryan walked over. "What?" She shoved the phone into his hands. The silence that followed was almost musical. I recognized the photograph immediately. It was the front of the house. My house. Their house, the house, listed online for sale. Ryan looked up at me. "Dad?" I folded my newspaper calmly. "Yes? What is this?" "The house listing." His face turned pale. "You listed the house?" "I did." Melissa jumped to her feet. "You can't do that." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can." Her mouth opened and closed, like a fish. Ryan stepped forward. "Dad, this has to be some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You didn't even talk to us." The irony hit so hard I nearly laughed. "I didn't talk to you?" His expression shifted. He knew. The moment I said it, he knew exactly what I meant. The room became very quiet. Melissa crossed her arms. "This is retaliation." "No." I stood slowly. "This is ownership." I looked directly at her. "For years, I've paid every property tax." I looked at Ryan. "I paid the mortgage. Back to both of them. The insurance, the repairs, the maintenance, the utilities." I took a breath. And then one day I learned I was being moved into a guest room. Nobody spoke. Because there was nothing to say. The facts were sitting in the room with us. Heavy, undeniable, uncomfortable. Ryan rubbed his forehead. "Dad, that's not what we meant." "Then what did you mean?" Silence. Agon. Interesting how quickly confidence disappears when accountability arrives. The first open house drew more than 40 people. 40. Cars lined the street. Potential buyers walked through every room, admiring, measuring, discussing offers. Melissa looked like she was attending her own funeral. Ryan wasn't much better. For the first time, they realized something important. They had treated the house like an inheritance. I treated it like an asset, and assets can be sold. Over the next week, tensions exploded. Argument happened behind closed doors. Whispers stopped whenever I entered rooms. Doors slammed, phones rang, family members called. Apparently, my son had started a campaign. Everyone suddenly became concerned. Funny, nobody had called when I was being evicted from my own bedroom. But now that a valuable property was involved, everybody had opinions. My sister phoned. "You're being harsh." I laughed. "Am I?" "They need stability." I needed respect. She had no answer. None of them did, because every argument eventually crashed into the same wall. The house belonged to me, not emotionally. Legally, 2 weeks later, the offers arrived, and they were extraordinary. Several bidding wars pushed the price far above asking. I sat with my real estate agent reviewing paperwork. My hands remained perfectly steady. The highest offer was nearly $200,000 above market value. $200,000. A lifetime of sacrifice finally paying unexpected dividends. The agent smiled. "Congratulations." I nodded, but strangely, I didn't feel victorious. Not yet, because this had never been about money. It was about dignity. Money was simply the vehicle. That evening, Ryan knocked on my bedroom door. The real bedroom. My bedroom. "Can we talk?" I looked up from my book. "Sure." He sat down slowly. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. The little boy who cried when his mother died. The little boy I'd spent years protecting from every storm. And suddenly, I felt tired. Not angry, not vengeful. Just tired. "Dad," his voice cracked. "I messed up. I waited. I don't know when it happened." Neither did he. That was obvious. People rarely notice the exact moment gratitude turns into entitlement. They only notice when consequences arrive. Tears filled his eyes. "We weren't trying to push you out. You already did." The truth landed hard, because truth always does. For several seconds, neither of us spoke, then Ryan surprised me. He started crying, not dramatic tears. Real tears. The kind grown men hate showing, the kind that come from regret. I became someone Mom wouldn't recognize. The words hit me like a punch, because he was right, and because he knew it. I looked away. Toward the photograph sitting on my dresser. My wife, smiling, forever frozen at 58, gone for 11 years, but somehow still the moral compass of this family. Ryan followed my gaze and cried harder. I think she'd be ashamed of me." The room fell silent, and for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I saw genuine remorse, not fear, not panic, not concern about losing the house. Remorse, the real thing. And that's when I realized the sale of the house wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning, because the greatest revenge isn't making people suffer. It's forcing them to confront who they've become. And for the first time in a very long time, my son was finally looking in the mirror. The question now wasn't whether the house would sell. The contracts were already moving forward. That part was done. The question was whether our family could survive what came next. And as I looked at my son sitting there with tears streaming down his face, I honestly didn't know the answer. Ryan sat across from me, his eyes red and swollen. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Then he finally whispered, "Dad, please don't sell the house." I looked at him, really looked at him. Not at the 38-year-old man sitting in front of me, but at the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders, the little boy who would run into my arms after school, the little boy who once told his mother, "Dad can fix anything. The problem was, I couldn't fix this because he was the one who broke it." I swallowed hard. "Tell me something, Ryan." He nodded. "When did I stop being your father and start being an inconvenience?" His face collapsed. "Dad, no." My voice cracked for the first time, not with anger, with heartbreak. "I want to know." Tears rolled down his cheeks, I continued. "When your mother was dying, do you remember what I promised her?" Ryan lowered his head. I didn't wait for an answer. "I promised her I'd take care of you." My chest tightened. And I did. I worked overtime. I missed birthdays. I skipped vacations. I sold my fishing boat. I cashed out my retirement investments. I did everything I could to make sure you never felt what it was like to grow up without security. My voice grew quieter. "Do you know how many nights I sat alone at this kitchen table after your mother died?" Ryan was crying openly now. "I know, Dad, no." I shook my head. "You don't. Because if you knew," I pointed toward the hallway, "you never would have asked me to leave my own bedroom." The room became suffocatingly quiet. Every word landed like a hammer. Every memory felt like a wound reopening. Ryan buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry." But something inside me finally broke. Not anger, not bitterness. The grief I'd been carrying for years. The grief nobody ever noticed. The grief of becoming invisible inside your own family. I stood up, slowly, painfully. "You know what hurt the most?" Ryan looked up, tears streamed down my face. The bedroom wasn't what hurt. His expression changed. Confusion, fear, heartbreak. The guest room wasn't what hurt. I pressed a hand against my chest. What hurt, my voice nearly disappeared, was realizing nobody asked how I felt. The word shattered something inside the room. Ryan froze because he knew I was right. Melissa had planned. Ryan had agreed. Everyone had discussed my future, without me, as if I were already gone, as if I were furniture, as if I were waiting to die. I laughed softly, a broken laugh. "Do you know what it's like to walk through a house you built and suddenly realize you're a guest in it?" Ryan couldn't answer, because there was no answer. Only guilt, only truth, only regret. Then I walked over to the fireplace. Above it hung the family portrait, the last picture taken before my wife passed away. I lifted it from the wall, held it carefully, and stared at her smile. "I talked to your mother every night after she died." Ryan's eyes widened. "What?" I nodded. "Every night." My fingers trembled around the frame, when things got hard, when I missed her, when I didn't think I could keep going. A tear slid down my cheek. "And do you know what I told her 3 weeks ago?" Ryan shook his head. "I told her I was proud of the man her son had become." The silence was devastating, because both of us understood what came next. I looked directly into his eyes. "And then you asked me to move into the guest room." Ryan broke completely. The sound that came out of him wasn't crying anymore. It was grief. Raw grief. The grief of realizing you've wounded someone who loved you unconditionally. The grief of realizing you can't take back what was said. The grief of understanding that apologies don't erase scars. "Dad." He fell to his knees, not dramatically, not for show, because his legs literally gave out. "I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. For a second, I saw my wife, her smile, her laugh, her faith in our son. Then I looked at Ryan again. And for the first time since this began, I saw punishment working. Not because he was losing a house, not because he was losing money, because he was finally feeling the weight of what he had done. And sometimes, that is the heaviest punishment of all. The house could be replaced, the money could be earned again. But the moment a child realizes they broke their parent's heart, that stays with them forever. Ryan sobbed quietly, and standing there in the middle of the home I'd spent my life building, I realized something devastating. The house was never what I was selling. I was selling the illusion. The illusion that love can survive without respect. The illusion that sacrifice guarantees gratitude. The illusion that family automatically stays family. And as my son cried on the floor, I finally understood something my wife had once told me years ago. People don't reveal their character when they need you. They reveal it when they think you need them. And now, my son was finally seeing his own reflection. For the first time in his life, and it terrified him. Ryan remained on the floor long after the tears stopped. The room felt frozen in time. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches against the windows, but inside the house, there was only silence, a silence filled with things that should have been said years ago. I looked at my son, and suddenly I looked older than I had ever felt, not because of age, because of disappointment. There is a special kind of pain that comes from strangers hurting you, but there is a deeper pain that comes from your own child making you feel unwanted. That wound doesn't bleed. It settles in your chest and stays there. Ryan finally stood, his shoulders slumped, his eyes were swollen. For the first time in years, he didn't look like the successful executive everyone admired. He looked like a little boy who had gotten lost. "Dad," his voice trembled. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "When did you decide to sell the house?" I stared at him. "The morning after." His face tightened. "The morning after what?" "The morning after you told me I was moving." The answer hit him harder than anything else, because it revealed the truth. I hadn't sold the house after weeks of anger. I hadn't done it after arguments. I hadn't done it after being manipulated. I did it immediately. The moment I realized my place in the family. The moment I understood how they saw me. That realization crushed him, because now he knew just how deeply he had hurt me. That night, nobody slept. Melissa stayed upstairs. Ryan sat alone in the living room, and I sat on the back porch. The same porch where my wife and I used to drink coffee every morning. I could almost hear her laugh. Almost. The memories came rushing back, the day we bought the house. The day Ryan took his first steps across the hardwood floor. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduation celebrations, the funeral after my wife passed away. Every chapter of our lives existed within those walls. And now strangers would own it. Strangers would paint over the walls, chant the floors, remove the memories. The thought should have broken my heart. Instead, it brought peace, because for the first time in years, I wasn't holding on to the house. I was letting go. 3 days later, the buyers submitted their final offer, cash. No contingencies, 30-day close. The highest bid, the paperwork arrived shortly before lunch. I signed everything, every page, every signature, every initial. With each stroke of the pen, another chapter ended. When I finished, my real estate agent smiled. "Congratulations." I forced a smile, but inside, I felt something unexpected. Grief not for the house, for the family I thought I had. The news hit Ryan and Melissa that evening. The sale was official. Nothing could stop it. No negotiations, no delays, no second chances. Melissa burst into tears. "What are we supposed to do now?" I looked at her quietly. The question echoed through the room. What are we supposed to do now? A question I had asked myself countless times after my wife died. A question nobody had answered for me. Now it was their turn. Ryan wrapped an arm around her. For the first time, I noticed how scared they both looked. Not angry, scared, because reality had arrived. And reality doesn't negotiate. A week later, something happened that I never expected. My grandson Ethan knocked on my bedroom door. He was only 9 years old, still innocent enough to tell the truth, still young enough to notice things adults ignored. "Grandpa?" "Yeah, buddy?" He walked inside, holding a drawing. A crayon drawing, our house, stick figures stood in front. Me, Ryan, Melissa, him, together. He handed it to me. "I made this." My throat tightened. "It's beautiful." He smiled, then his smile faded. "Are you leaving because of me?" The question punched the air from my lungs. "What?" His eyes filled with tears. "I heard Mom and Dad fighting." My heart shattered. They said everything changed because of the house. He looked down. Did I do something wrong? I immediately pulled him into my arms. "No." The word came out stronger than intended. "No, Ethan." He buried his face against my shoulder. "Then why is everybody sad?" I closed my eyes because there was no easy answer. How do you explain adult selfishness to a child? How do you explain entitlement? How do you explain betrayal? You don't. You simply protect them from it. So I held him tighter and whispered the truth. "The adults forgot something important." "What?" "How to appreciate each other." His little arms squeezed me, and in that moment I realized something devastating. The only truly innocent person in this entire story was the child. The closing day arrived. 30 years. Reduced to a stack of documents, a few signatures, and a set of keys. I stood inside the empty living room one final time. The furniture was gone. The photographs were gone. The decorations were gone. Only echoes remained. Ryan stood beside me, silent. Melissa stood behind him, her eyes red from crying. Nobody knew what to say, because some endings are too big for words. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the house keys, and looked around one final time. Every sacrifice, every memory, every dream contained within these walls. Then I handed the keys to the new owners. Just like that. It was over that night. Ryan followed me to my new apartment, a beautiful lakefront condo paid for entirely with the proceeds from the sale, smaller, quieter, peaceful, exactly what I wanted. He stood in the doorway looking around. "Dad?" I turned. He swallowed hard. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "No." His eyes watered instantly. "You don't." The truth hurt, but it was still the truth. "I know." I nodded, then I stepped closer. "But forgiveness isn't something you earn." His face crumpled. "It's something someone chooses." Tears streamed down his cheeks, the same way they had the night everything changed. The same way they had the day he finally understood. And for the first time in months, I saw humility. Real humility, not fear, not guilt. Humility, the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of growth. The beginning of becoming better. "Dad," his voice broke, "I love you." The words hung in the air. Still, honest, late, but honest. I looked at him for a long moment, then pulled him into a hug. The first hug we'd shared since all of this began. And suddenly, both of us were crying, not because the house was gone, because the relationship had survived barely, but survived. Months later, I sat on the balcony overlooking the lake. The sunset painted the water gold. My phone buzzed, a message from Ryan, a photograph, Ethan standing beside a newly planted tree. The caption read, "Grandpa, Dad says strong things grow slowly. This one is for Grandma." I stared at the picture and smiled for the first time in a very long time. Then another message appeared from Ryan. Just one sentence. A sentence that meant more than any apology, more than any tears, more than any promise. It read, "Thank you for teaching me that being a father isn't about owning a home. It's about honoring the people who built it." I looked out across the water, toward the fading sunlight, and thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the sale, the consequences, the regret. In the end, the greatest revenge wasn't selling the house. It wasn't the money. It wasn't watching them panic. The greatest revenge was forcing them to understand the value of what they almost lost. Because houses can be replaced. Money can be earned again. But once a parent feels unwanted, some wounds never completely heal. The good news is that sometimes those wounds become lessons. And sometimes those lessons save a family. As darkness settled over the lake, I raised my coffee cup toward the sky, toward my wife, toward the woman who always believed our son would find his way back. And quietly, with tears in my eyes, I whispered, "You were right." Then I smiled, because for the first time in years, I was finally home. Ryan stood frozen in the doorway of my new condo. His eyes were red, his hands trembled. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, there was nothing left protecting him from the truth. No house, no excuses, no entitlement, no illusion that tomorrow would magically erase yesterday. Just consequences, raw and unavoidable. I walked to the window overlooking the lake. The sunset reflected across the water like liquid gold, beautiful, peaceful. Earned behind me, Ryan finally spoke. "Dad, if I could take it back, I would." I nodded slowly. "I know." His voice cracked. "I don't know when I became that person." I turned and looked at him. Then I said the words that would stay with him for the rest of his life. "You didn't become that person overnight." The room fell silent. It happened one small decision at a time, his eyes filled with tears. One moment when gratitude became expectation. One moment when respect became convenience. One moment when love became entitlement. I took a step closer. "And by the time you asked me to move into the guest room, you didn't even realize what you were saying." Ryan broke down again, because deep inside, he knew it was true. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to betray the people who sacrificed everything for them. It happens slowly, quickly, one selfish choice at a time, until one day they look in the mirror and don't recognize themselves, the same way he was looking at himself now. Months passed, then a year. Life moved forward. The house was gone. The money was invested. The lake became my morning view. Peace replaced tension. Silence replaced arguments. And for the first time since my wife died, I felt free. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Grandpa," I smiled instantly. "Hey, buddy, you have to come see something." An hour later, I drove across town. Ryan opened the front door of his new home, smaller than the old one. Far less impressive, but something about it felt different, warmer, humbler, healthier. When I stepped into the backyard, Ethan grabbed my hand. "Come look." He pulled me toward a young oak tree. At its base sat a small bronze plaque. I bent down and read the inscription. The words instantly blurred through my tears, "On honor of the man who built our family before he built our home." "Thank you," Dad. I couldn't speak. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then I felt Ryan standing beside me. "I wanted to give you something." His voice shook. "Something that couldn't be sold." I looked at him. His eyes were full of tears, just like mine, and then he handed me a letter, a simple envelope, nothing fancy. Inside was one page that took him an entire year to write. At the top were 6 words, words I had waited a lifetime to hear. "I finally understand what you gave up." The rest of the letter wasn't about money. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't about inheritance. It was about sacrifice. Every overtime shift, every missed vacation, every dream postponed, every burden carried, every silent struggle hidden behind a father's smile. For the first time in his life, my son truly saw me, not as a provider, not as a safety net, not as an obligation, as a man, a father, a human being. And somehow that meant more than any house ever could. That night, after everyone went inside, I remained by the tree alone. The wind moved softly through the branches. The stars appeared one by one overhead. I looked up toward the sky, toward the place where I imagined my wife watching. And I smiled, because after all the pain, after all the betrayal, after all the heartbreak, I finally understood something. Selling the house was never revenge. The house was only the lesson. The real revenge was watching my son become the man he should have been all along. The real victory wasn't taking something away from him. It was forcing him to discover the value of what he almost lost forever. And standing there beneath that young oak tree, I realized something that brought tears to my eyes. The house I spent 30 years building eventually belonged to strangers. But the family I spent my life building found its way back home. I placed my hand on the plaque one last time, then looked toward the glowing windows, where my son, my grandson, and my future were waiting, and with a full heart, I whispered into the night, My job is done. For the first time in years, there was no anger left, no resentment, no unfinished business. Only peace, the kind of peace that comes when respect is restored. The kind of peace that comes when love survives the truth. And as I walked toward the house, toward my family, toward the second chance we had all fought to earn, I realized something beautiful. The day my son told me to move into the guest room felt like the end of my story. In reality, it was the day I finally became the author of it. And this time, I chose the ending. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with dignity, because dignity is the one thing nobody can take from you, unless you hand it over. And I never would again.